Hello. To start the lesson, I'd like you to think about the questions you have asked people this week. Were they long questions? Were they short questions? Were you trying to get a complicated answer or a simple answer? Now, sometimes in your own language and in English, asking questions seems like a very straightforward, easy thing to do. However, at this level in English, there are some details that you need to be careful about if you want to ask questions properly in English. So in this lesson, we're going to be looking at sort of the three main forms of asking questions at intermediate level. So first of all, what we're going to take a look at is what's called subject questions. Subject questions take this form. Question words, so that's what, where, when, who, why, how, for example, followed by an auxiliary verb, do or did in the past, are, followed by the subject, that is to say, what is the sentence about, and then the verb followed by the question mark. Now, if we have a look at these questions, the term subject question isn't too important as to what is more important for you to worry about is the kind of answer you're looking for. So, what do you do at the weekend? So things to remember include the auxiliary verb, you've got the subject at the end of the sentence. Now think of the answer to this question. What do you do at the weekend? Well, at the weekend, whatever it is you did that weekend. So really with a subject question, what we're doing is focusing specifically on a subject that we want to hear more about from the person we ask the question. So typically, a subject question should get a longer response. Where did you eat yesterday? So again, we've got the auxiliary, so subject question here, and again, we're looking for a little bit more. Sort of, where did you eat yesterday? Well, yesterday I ate at this restaurant, and then the conversation can go from there. When are they going? And again, we're asking for more information. We're not looking for a one-word answer. We're not looking for simple information. We're not checking. We want an actual natural response from the person we ask this question to. Who do we know in this town? And again, the answer being, well, in this town, we know these people, these people, these people. So again, watch out for the auxiliary because it's easy to forget that you put the auxiliary in this question. How did you learn all this so quickly? So again, auxiliary form, got the subject here with the verb, and again, we're looking for more from the person we're asking this question than just yes or no or one word. So typically as well, a subject question would be sort of a starter to a conversation as opposed to a middle or an ending when we want more information from a speaker. So far we've looked at subject questions. That is questions with what or where or how question words as well as auxiliary verbs which are looking for a longer answer from the person we give to. What we're going to look now are shorter questions that are looking for shorter answers, maybe because we've got less time or maybe we just care less. So the auxiliary questions are called that because they contain and start with auxiliary verbs like does or do or have or did. An auxiliary verb is sort of an extra verb that's quite flexible, and that again is not so important here as what is the actual function of the question itself. Now in terms of the structure, auxiliary verb plus subject like he or you or they plus the verb with a question mark. Now if we have a look at these questions, for example, does he live here? Well again the answer is very simple, yes he does or no he doesn't. Do you like this food? Yes I do or no I don't. Have they finished? Well again it's a yes or no answer. Did she call you again? So this time in the past simple, and we're asking a question about the past, then when we want a simple answer, yes she did or no she didn't. Has the film started? And again, quick information that we want quickly because of the situation, because sometimes we don't always want long answers that we get with subject questions. So in the lesson so far, we've looked at long form questions or subject questions when we're asking for more information from somebody. And we've also looked at auxiliary questions, short questions that give us short, quick pieces of information. In between these two forms of questions are what we call object questions. Object questions, we want more information than an auxiliary question, but probably less information than a subject question. And as you can see, they're similar to subject questions in that we've got whose, who, what, where, when, the more complicated question forms. But what we do not have is the auxiliary verb do or did or have. So the form of an object question looks like this. We've got the question word, then a verb, and then the object, and of course we always use a question mark. Now if we look at the questions and think about the functions, it will be clear to us how we should use them. For example, whose are these socks? So this is not a broad focus like a subject question, but at the same time, we want more information than we get from auxiliary questions with a yes or no answer. So this time, if we think of the answer to this question, it would be, these socks are or they belong to. So again, a nice clear sentence telling us exactly what we want in the specific focus given by the question. Who ate all the cake? So again, past simple, object question, and we want direct information, but we want clear information. What happened? Now again, this looks like a very simple question, but it's not going to get a one-word answer. But at the same time, if you ask somebody, what do you think happened, a subject question, we would get a much longer answer. Here, we would get direct facts, hopefully, about the events that occurred in the context of this question. Similarly, where is it? And again, if we contrast that with the subject question we would ask, where do you think it is, which would receive a much longer answer. Here, the focus is narrow, the context is very clear. We want a sentence telling us exactly the location of it. When is the party starting? So again, you might receive a one-word answer here, 7:30, but it would be more likely that you would receive a sentence as an answer as opposed to one-word answers or longer statements that we would receive from subject questions. So in this lesson, we've looked at 3 question forms in English. We started by looking at subject questions, which have the long question forms with what, where, when, but also contain the auxiliary verbs do, sometimes has as well, which receive longer answers when we ask them. Then we looked at shorter questions using auxiliary verbs like do, does, and did, and we looked at the way that they receive shorter answers owing to time constraints, or we just don't really want a long answer. Then we looked at object questions, and we looked at how object questions give us sort of medium-sized information. Not one-word answers, not very long answers about what people think, but just sort of a narrow focus depending on the situation that we use them in. Now to check that you've understood the questions, you can take the exercises which follow this lesson. Good luck.